Call the meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. Our special meeting got done, and we had to wait 15 minutes, so now we're kicking off with recognitions, and I understand the first one is Andrea. You have the first couple ones, right?
Yes, so the first one is Noah Earl. If you could come up to the microphone, please. He's a seventh grader at Hudson Middle School, and he won the regional competition for the state spelling bee on February 17th at Woodville. He went on to represent our region and compete in the state spelling bee on March 18th in Madison. We want to congratulate Noah on his outstanding performance at the state spelling bee. And now Anne is here as well to talk about Noah.
Actually, I'm going to turn it over to Erica Matson, one of his teachers in Avalon, and Mr. Yell's here too, another teacher of Noah's. Noah went to Holton, so I know him well, but he's got some great attributes that Erica's going to tell you about.
Good evening. All right, so I am Noah's language arts teacher in Avalon House, 7th grade. Noah Earl is a very positive and determined individual in all areas of his life. He is very dedicated to his academics and his activities both in and outside of school. He perseveres through some of the toughest struggles, such as the spelling bee. Often he would stay after school to study and practice the spelling bee words, which would end up being pretty late too, sometimes almost 5 p.m. Noah has an ethical side to him and leads by example. I am glad to know and have Noah as a student. I know that Noah always gives his best and will achieve to the highest of his ability.
Awesome.
Now, if any of the board members have any questions for Noah?
Mr. President?
Yes, Bruce.
All right. So I've had the opportunity and pleasure to know Noah since kindergarten because he and my oldest are and have been in class and are buddies. So a couple questions for you. First of all, I want to hear about the experience and what was something that you took away that was fun and positive, and then before you walk away, I want to know what word was the word that you went out on, and maybe tell us about that.
Okay, so first of all, my experience was very positive. I enjoyed getting that far and seeing how much work it took to actually get there. Once I got to state, you could tell that everyone who was there knew exactly what they were doing. They'd studied the lists back and forth, and just, you know that everyone put in the work to get there. But you couldn't just have looked at the lists and won that, because once we got to about the 12th or 13th round, 12 people went out because that's when they went off list.
Okay.
So it definitely was very difficult, and I am happy to have had that experience.
And then the word.
The word I went out on was during a vocabulary round. So they added that this year, where they gave you a word and 2 definitions. You had to tell them the correct one. And my word was buckwheat. The only buckwheat I know is buckwheat from Little Rascals.
Oh.
So when they gave me the 2 options of either an ingredient in foods or an ingredient in pesticide, I said pesticide and got it wrong.
Oh.
That's all right.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations. You're definitely a very sharp individual. I know you got a bright future, and you can do this again next year, right? If
Yes.
you get fortunate enough to make it that far?
Yes.
Attaboy. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
I was just going to ask his mom and dad, how long has he been correcting your spelling?
Our next
Thanks for sharing, John. That's good. All right.
Our next recognition is Shlok Johnny, if he could come up. And he went to the state geographic bee. He's a 5th grader at Rivercrest, and he qualified to compete in the state level competition of the National Geographic Bee held on April 1st, 2016. Shlok came in 15th out of 100 competitors. The National Geographic Bee is a competition for students in grade 4 through 8. The school champion takes on online qualifying tests, and the top 100 ranked students in each state qualify to represent their school in the state bee. We want to congratulate Shlok on his outstanding performance at the State Geographic Bee. And I know that there's representatives from Rivercrest that would also like to talk about him.
Hi, I'm Mrs. May, and I've been working with Schloek since kindergarten. I'm the former GT teacher here, and I was the coordinator for the National Geography Bee. The National Geographic Bee is incredibly difficult and rigorous with its questions. You may think, well, it just covers states and capitals and countries. It covers cultural, physical, political, and historical geography. The questions are incredibly difficult. Schloek has studied a long time for it. He's a very motivated student. He's a voracious reader, conscientious. He also was our school winner of the spelling bee and placed 7th at regionals. He's the winner of a regional writing competition, and he's placed in the top in all of our Math Masters competitions. So we're looking at a very accomplished young man who did very, very well in the National Geography Bee. I thought I'd just give you a sample of a couple questions. These are questions that they had today on the National Geographic Bee quiz. What landlocked Eastern African country was once known as Abyssinia? Anybody? That would be Ethiopia. Cappadocia is to Turkey as Gascony is to, anybody? That'd be France. So these are the type of questions that Schloek faced when he was in the GOB. So I'll let him take over from now.
And board members, do you have any questions of Schloek?
And Schloek, could you say what grade are you in again?
I'm in grade 5.
So you still have a couple more years left, 3, right?
Yep.
You probably calculated that faster than I did. So. Rob, did you have something to say?
How did you prepare with the types of questions and the variety? My gosh! And by the way, you have to be a student during the day.
Well, I prepared by first I'd go over the major subjects like borders first, and then if a country was landlocked or not. Then I went to mountains and rivers, like major ones. Then I delved deeper later, and that was about as far as I got.
And what visuals do you use? Do you go online, or do you look at real maps as in on paper? Or how do you visually study geography?
Well, I do both of them. I go online for like more detailed maps of like a city or a specific state or something like that. But in general, I look at the countries with world maps.
Mr. President,
Yes, Bruce.
do you watch the show Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader?
No.
Oh. I'm sure you could be on it.
Yeah.
He doesn't watch TV, obviously.
Very impressive.
So you happen to do very well in the geography bee, but your teacher were saying how you excelled in these other areas. Do you have a favorite? Do you like math better or spelling better or?
Yeah, I like math the best because I was taught it from like age 4 or 5, and it's been my favorite subject constantly because algebra is just so fun, and so is geometry and other subjects.
That's great. So which one do you find that you need to study the most?
Probably the GOB because it's open-ended most of the time, so you need to study like everything. Whereas in the spelling bee, there's just one word, there's one answer, and then if you get it right, you're good. If you get it wrong, you're out.
That's an awesome answer. All right, go ahead.
Did you say algebra?
Yeah.
That's great. Well, I have a feeling that we're going to be seeing Schloek back here a few more times in the coming years, and we're very, very proud of your performance and just for representing Hudson. Thank you again.
You're welcome.
If I wanted to add about Schloek that he came and advocated shortly after he was at the State Bee for everybody to have geography classes on a regular basis, and how wonderful and how much he's learned from it and how much he'd like everybody else to as well. We were able to facilitate this experience through him through Betsy May's volunteering of her time. She came in on her own time in her retirement to make sure that the 5th graders had this experience this year, and has volunteered to continue to do that, so also to acknowledge her. So thank you.
All right. And now we move on to the Herb Cole recipients, and Tim, you have that?
I do, yes. I'm going to have Leah Suter come up to the mic, along with Elizabeth Smith, high school counselor, who nominated Leah for the 2016 Herb Cole Initiative Scholarship. Students chosen for this award have demonstrated exceptional initiative in the classroom, and they've shown strong promise for succeeding in college and beyond. The initiative scholars are chosen by their schools. As I mentioned, Elizabeth Smith nominated Leah. Elizabeth describes Leah as resilient, a hard worker, and a genuine person who does amazing in school. And so the school district wants to congratulate Leah on this accomplishment as a senior at Hudson High School on receiving the prestigious award. And so I'll turn it over to Elizabeth first, and then we may hear something from Leah, or you may have some questions for Leah.
Great. Well, I have to use this because I am not awesome at speaking in public. So, as Tim said, I'm Elizabeth Smith, and I'm a high school counselor. And I have the honor of having the class of 2016. And so I inherited Leah in the beginning of her junior year from John Dornfeld, who was her counselor for the first 2 years and adored her. When I met Leah, she was a straight-A student who was taking mainly college level and college prep courses and had a full load. But what a lot of people didn't know about Leah is that at the same time she was managing with the fact that her beloved parents, both of her beloved parents, were suffering with life-threatening cancers. So through that, I have to say that Leah was just so resilient, and it was at school all the time and in her classes, and rarely asked for anything, and continued to achieve straight A's in her courses. And just honestly, it's just been such a pleasure to work with her. Once she did open up to me, it was apparent that, you know, she was being a real caregiver at home while achieving at school. And I just find her to be one of the most genuine, kind-hearted, wonderful students I've ever had the pleasure of working with. Leah is going to go to the U of M next year, where she's going to do amazing. And I'm just going to give you one example of the kind of girl that Leah is. This summer, on August 25th, Leah lost her father to his battle with cancer. And on the very same day, I lost my son, Sam. And 2 days later, Leah was at his memorial, standing in the long line of people, and I had no idea that her father had died. I only found that out later, but found it out later that day, and couldn't believe that she was there and there for me. And actually, I could believe it, because that's the kind of person that Leah is, but I just think it's extraordinary. So she's just very deserving.
Well, thank you for the nomination.
Can I ask?
Go ahead, yes.
You're going to the U of M, did she say?
Yes.
And what field of study do you plan on going into, or are you thinking about?
I got into the Carlson School of Management, so I'm thinking I would like to study human resource management.
Any particular kind of job that you'd like to have when you're done?
Not necessarily. I talked to my mom about it actually a couple weeks ago. I'd really like to work for Target. So we'll see.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I understand Ms. Smith nominated you for this?
Yes.
And so it's not something like, did you know what the criteria were, or that you had even been nominated for this?
I think there were like a couple schools throughout the state, and they, like, if they were selected, they each got to nominate one high school senior.
Great.
Another question, is this is this scholarship something that is recurring every year, or is it just for your freshman year?
It's just for my freshman year.
Mr. President,
Yes, Lynn.
I just want to thank you for allowing her to share that story about you. It was very inspirational, and thank you for all you do to represent Hudson.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
thank you.
Yep. Good luck in all that you do it from here on out.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, we have Linda Wagner, third grade teacher at Willow River, and I think Kim Osterhus is coming up with her as well. I'll tell you a little bit of background. Leah has been awarded the Herb Cole Educational Foundation Fellow Scholarship, and those folks are chosen for their superior ability to inspire a love of learning in their students, their ability to motivate others, and for their leadership and service within and outside the classroom. The Herb Cole Foundation annually awards 100 teachers fellowship grants, so not very many. Hudson is proud to announce Linda as the third grade teacher at Willow River, recipient of the Herb Cole Award. I will go on to add, I think Linda said she believes that it's the right of every child to have an equal opportunity education in a positive learning environment that not only fosters confident, capable students, but also encourages a variety of learning styles. A parent shared that she spends hours and hours beyond her required school day to prep, plan, and meet every child's needs. A former student currently pursuing a degree in elementary education stated that Linda is the reason that she is on the path she is today. So Hudson is extremely fortunate to have such an inspiring educator working with her students. So we'll like to congratulate Leah.
Linda.
Or, I'm sorry, Linda. Wrong name.
Thank you.
All right. Can you give us a little more history of how long you've been in teaching?
I started as an assistant in an EBD classroom. My kids were little, and then so I've been with the district for over 18 years as a classroom teacher. Second and third grade, I've looped a couple times, and I'm going to be looping again next year, third to fourth. So I'm excited about that opportunity, and reflecting on this, and this is actually my third teacher award with the district, and the first one was Star Excellence, and the second was a Fox 9 News Channel thing. But this one they've all been nominated from parents, and so I think that is such really an amazing thing about Hudson, is the parents in the community just really support teachers and recognize that. This one, I have to say, I went to Kim and I said, okay, I've been nominated. What do you think? Should I go through with it? And she said yes, and it was this huge application. And we sat down and she helped me tweak it and really helped reflect Hudson and the support we have as teachers. And then it went to Nick, and he got it and sent it to regionals. And then you got this note that said, you kind of felt like you're on American Idol or something, you know. You made it to the state, and then they said that 10 went to the state out of the regions, and then 3 from our region received it. So it's a really cool honor. So I'm pretty proud of it.
Any board members, comments?
Well, I have I'm sorry,
No,
Sandy.
go ahead.
Okay. I just was curious about your philosophy of education, like, you're putting the last comb through your hair in the morning and you're ready to go to school. What's your kind of watchword for your relationship with your students?
Wow, that's a good question. I think I want to teach the whole child and recognize that they are little people that have lives outside of school, and whatever I can do, I'll do to help them have a great day. And my room is a little crazy. There's a bunny, and so it's not that traditional, I would say. No.
Sandy?
I would just say that congratulations, this is a really big honor, and
Thank
I'm
you.
so glad that you're with the Hudson School District and not somewhere else.
I'm happy to be here, and I really think even after I live in Baldwin, but just everything that's gone on in the last week as well, the support from families is outstanding, and we really appreciate that as teachers.
Thank you again for your service and all your work. And I have to give a little dig here to Tim. You know, he was the fourth string presenter for this award, because normally it'd be Sandy Kovac. She's up there in the picture, and she's out skiing, and then it would have been Tony, or then it would have been Dave. So Tim stepped in fine, and thank you for helping us out with that. Yeah, and Andrea helped with the earlier one. So, well, and it's about the right ratio, 3 to 1. There's 3 students recognized, 1 teacher. I mean, we've got lots of great teachers, and but they're the reason why we have these students getting these awards too. So, thank you. All right, next up on the agenda is citizens' request to speak about non-action items. Tim, do we have anyone that submitted anything? All right. So that means that we're now up to superintendent's reports, and turn over to Dr. Nick.
All right, the first item on my report is the official results from the April 5th school board election and referendum. Just want to touch base on a couple of items that, as everybody's aware, all 3 referendum questions did pass. The first 2 questions passed at about a 58-42%. And the third question passed about 52-48, so a little bit closer margin. We did have more than 2,000, 3,000 additional people voting in this April's election than what we would typically have in an April election. We had a total of about 12,000 people, so I guess it'd be a little bit more than that. About 12,000 people voted in this election on the school-related issues. The top vote getter for school board was Bruce Hanson, then Jamie Johnson, and then Mary Yakub. And the top 2 candidates would move on to be selected or seated at the school board meeting. So that would be Bruce Hanson and Jamie Johnson. So these are the official results. We have the official results on our website. Is that right, Tracy? It's on our website. Up until this point, until this morning at 9 o'clock, when Carrie did the official canvassing at the district office, we had unofficial results on the district website. And so the totals changed a little bit, a couple votes here and there, but and that primarily had to do with the absentee ballots and things along those lines. So those are the election results. Any questions associated with the election results?
Well, I just wanted to thank the public for the turnout. I think it's great for us to hear the feedback on what the community's thinking, and I just appreciate that number of people got out there to go and tell us what your thoughts are.
Yes. Any other comments? I think that the fact that the referendum passed by the margins that it did with the high turnout is also very satisfying to get that participation from the community. I'm going to have a few comments more about that later on, but I think that is an important observation here as far as comparing this to other years where we've had a lot less participation in the April election. So.
Well, I think it just goes to show that you don't have to run a special election to pass a referendum. You can do it on a very widely, I guess, involved election and still have good results. And so I think we feel pretty good about that. The next thing would be the timeline for the next 12 months, or what we would see so now what? And I just want to give kind of a 30,000-foot overview of the next steps. So even since April 5th, which was last Tuesday, we have sent out RFQ requests, which is a request for qualifications to 9 different firms from both Wisconsin and Minnesota. 9 firms that we believe would have the capacity to handle a project of this size and magnitude. The RFQs are due back on April 19th, which is next Tuesday. We would then have a committee of individuals that would take that from the 9 requests, if we get 9 requests, down to 3, no more than 3 requests. That would be on April 20th. Those individuals would include Tim Erickson, myself, Tracy, Habashaleen, Dave Grambo, Sandy Gerke, Bruce Hanson, and Rob. And so what we would do is take that down. We have some rubrics that we're working through to get it down to 3. And then from there, we would determine the short list for the RFP process. And that's the actual big process where they submit potentially their ideas for addressing some of these issues. Part of that process will include tours of the sites on Monday, April 25th. So they will have a 1-hour tour of each site, both the high school site and the middle school site, and then they will have a 1-hour option to meet with the district administration and building administration of those two buildings to answer any questions or ask questions that they may have for us as they get ready to submit their RFP. The RFP presentations would then be to the board and the public sometime the third week in May. And that would be something that Jamie's going to talk about, I think, during his president's report, and so I won't go too far in depth on that. But after the architect is selected, we'll then move on to the construction manager selection phase, which is something that the architect would help us with, that process as well. We would anticipate, we don't have a timeline at this point, but we would anticipate that position being selected and on board no later than the end of June, so that we have both the architect and construction manager on board no later than the end of June, and we can move forward with that. As far as the financing of the projects, there will be a general overview tonight by Brian Brewer from Baird, and he'll be presenting that, so I don't want to steal any of his thunder, and I've been pushing him on different scenarios, so I'm sure he'll tell you about that tonight. But on the May 10th meeting, the board would be acting to provide the president and the treasurer the authority to sell bonds, depending on market, adjustments and things along those lines. And again, Brian will go through what that is more in depth. And then, like I said, there's more information coming later this meeting. As far as the design of the projects over the next kind of 12 months and where we're at, so we will work with staff at the building level, the district level, to start the design development phase, or the design vignettes, I think is a lot of times what they call them, for what these projects will start to look like as soon as this summer. So we won't be able to wait until after the school year and everybody's back. We'll be bringing staff in this summer for meetings and things along those lines to start narrowing down the design. We would anticipate the design phase running through December 2016. And we're primarily talking about the bulk of it. The design phase for some of the other parts of the project could finish up earlier than that. But when we're thinking about primarily the largest part of the project, which is the high school, construction drawings, we would anticipate for the high school and the middle school being sometime in January, February, where the architect would actually be creating blueprints from the designs that were created, with the bid going out in February 2017 and breaking ground in March 2017. Along the way, there will be several points for the board to act and give approvals to designs and plans and specifications and things along those lines. So we'll be keeping people up to date on that. As far as potential completion dates, the middle school has a potential completion date of December 2017. And again, these are tentative because these are dates that were set by the pre-referendum architect, and depending on the post-referendum architect, these are subject to change. The stadium project potential completion date would be September 2017, so it'd be for next fall. The high school, 9 phases, all final completion would be fall of 2019. As far as the transparency and community information and involvement, we've tried to be extremely transparent through this whole process. One thing you'll notice is that we did pull off of our website the line item budgets after the referendum passed, so that it did force all of the vendors to put together their own budgets versus just all use the same budget. Now, most people would say that if they were understanding the magnitude of the situation, they've probably pulled those documents down before we removed them, and that's fine, but we did want to make sure everybody was kind of on the same playing field to some extent as we move forward with it. We would anticipate additional documents going back up as we work through this process. We would also anticipate quarterly community meetings at the different locations where we would have board meetings and board updates, but community updates, question and answer sessions, tours of the facilities and the sites as we're moving forward. Not a whole lot of exciting things happen that first year as we're going through design development, but when people start seeing ground broken and they start to see remodels happen, they want to get in and see what that looks like. We would also look at a web page, link on our web page where you can keep up to date with the construction process, and maybe even look to see if we can put a webcam up posted at both the middle school and the high school, so we could have a live webcam shot of what's going on at any point. And then also we would anticipate articles to the HSO as far as updates, potentially on a monthly basis, and on the website providing updates as to where we're at in the process, and if people have questions, who can they contact? If they have input or they want to provide some feedback on things, who can they contact in that process? So really trying to continue that spirit of transparency that got us to this point and continuing to move it forward. And so that's what we kind of see as the next steps at a very high level for the secondary space projects. The last piece is the RFP meeting date and potential change to retreat. And I guess what I will say with this is Jamie's going to talk about this more in his report than me, but because we would be looking at having the RFP be approved by the entire board, not just a small group of board members, which would be hiring of the architectural firm, we would want to find time that all board members would be available to make that meeting date, because it's obviously a pretty important thing as we embark on a potentially $94 million project. So that's all I have, unless people have questions for me.
Any questions for Nick? Or other board members? All right. Well, on my agenda items, I guess just might as well talk about that one first. We had the Board of Education retreat. Our last work session was prior to the referendum, and we were trying to sort out when we would do a board retreat. And we have kind of reserved the May 21st. We've kind of decided that we would like to see that retreat talk about goals, vision, more of a high level, and values. Those were the three areas that we wanted to spend a half-day retreat on. But given now that the referendum did pass, I want to throw it open to board members here to get your ideas for, what we should do scheduling-wise, given that we want to give the three finalists, it's 3 weeks following their tours of the...
Yeah, they're gonna have about
schools.
3 weeks, and if we have three finalists, just to kind of give you an idea of the way that meeting would go, each finalist would have about a 45-minute presentation, followed up with about a 15-minute question and answer session. And so for three finalists, you're essentially looking at about a 3.5-hour chunk of time, because there's some breaks in between the two, so we can get one group out and next group in, and then you would have the deliberation piece after that. So it could be potentially a 4 to 5 hour meeting that is scheduled. Could happen on a Saturday, could happen in an evening, but really, however you guys want to do that.
But those tours are going to take place on April 25th for the finalists, and then if we give them 3 weeks to come up with proposals, then we're looking at that week of May 16. We've already kind of reserved the morning of May 21st, which is a Saturday, for about 4 hours. Now, if we may not have three finalists, we might only have two finalists, but we would be looking at closer to 5 hours then between the breaks in between the presentations, and then allowing us deliberation time to select the finalist.
Are you suggesting and asking us if we would prefer to use the 21st, since we already, all of us have that on our calendar, to interview the three finalists? Is that what you're suggesting?
Right. The alternative would be to do it and have one of those 6 to 11:30 meetings that we've become famous for, like we did on September 29th.
I'll pass.
All right.
I'm fine with the 21st for interviewing the candidates. I think that is a more important thing to move this along than it is.
More important than our board retreat?
Yes, I do believe that is true.
All
We
right.
could have the board retreat,
More time
anytime.
sensitive.
Well, yeah, and that's the thought. I mean, we could then start, and we don't have to do it tonight, but we could look at calendars for maybe down into July, which might be a better time to do a retreat anyways, so that we're not during the school year and so forth. So, but it also gets into vacations, and I know that weekends in the summer are tough. If we can pick a rain day that's 100% guaranteed to rain, that would be a great day to do the retreat. But is there any other comments, or is there a consensus? I just figured with our regular meeting being May 10th, trying to squeeze in another long meeting and then do the retreat on the 21st. I mean, does that make sense, or?
Yes. 21st is fine for
Agreed.
looking at the
21st
proposals.
works well.
Okay.
Okay.
I've already got it on my calendar, so.
We'll put together a schedule for the 21st, and depending on the number of firms, but we would anticipate it not being any more than 3, but it could be as few as 2.
All right.
Okay.
So that's set then. All right. in the retreat, we'll just table that for now as far as both timing, but we still have our subject matter, and we also need to look at availability of somebody from, it's WASB that puts that on?
Yeah, really looking at Drew Howick coming. Actually, he works with both WASB and WASDA. He works both at the public sector and then also in the private sector with different boards and leadership of large companies and things along those lines to create some of the things that you're talking about, vision, values, and goals as it relates to the board work.
All right, very good. So, and then as far as post-referendum discussion, I know we got a full agenda here tonight, but I just also want to offer opportunity if other board members are getting the kind of feedback I am, which is incredibly positive. Getting literally cards in the mail, emails, and people that I barely made eye contact with before are stopping me and thanking us for the work that we did. And when they say congratulations, well, it's really congratulations to the whole community. This is something that was 13 years in coming, and what I hear a lot of the people saying is they really attribute it, I mean, other than to the job that Nick did, but which was really all part of that community engagement. And I went back to when we started that process steward process, if you will, and I see one of our process stewards was here. There he is. He's still here, Joel Skinner. But we held 30-some meetings. Bruce and I, the two administrators, Dave and Tracy, and then Paul Bourget, Joe Burchell, Joel Skinner, Tom Van Pelt. And the whole purpose of the community engagement was to determine how best to meet the educational and facility needs of the next generation of Hudson School District students. The community engagement objectives were trust and transparency, inclusion, trying to engage the full range of stakeholders, and then consensus. And this, our consultant that we hired, Ann, forgot Ann's last name. What's that? No. It's going to come to me here.
Ann Carroll.
Ann Carroll, thank you. I had an email from her. All right, Ann Carroll, who's former St. Paul school board member. But she said consensus does not mean unanimity. I mean, we weren't expecting the referendum to pass 99 to 1 or 100 to 0. What you try to do is reach a strong community consensus. And it was all about data and needs and options. And then the other thing that struck me was going back over the hundreds, if not 1,000 emails that's in my email box since January of 2015. And that September 2nd workshop, how long we came from, well, how long it took us to get there, which was almost 8 months, and then to have something where we ended up having to set up new tables and chairs because of all the people that were there, and people broke up into groups, and they were all amazed at how many people were there that said, we want a new school on a new site, and yet we came together as a community and came up with an option that could get the kind of support that we saw in those referendums and what we allowed the community. So I think that we really fulfilled our promise to the community, and the level of engagement. What we promised back in January 2015 was community engagement for this overall project will be done at the involve level, which is on the IAP2 public participation spectrum. This is an international organization that talks about public participation. And our promise to the public was we will work with you to ensure that your concerns and aspirations are directly reflected in the alternatives developed and provide feedback on how the public input influenced the decision. And so you had amazing input from the night the Badgers were in the national championship and having task force meetings that night, to our September 2nd workshop, then to a meeting, 5.5-hour meeting on September 29th, where the number of options doubled from 11 to 22 in a 3-week period of time. We truly kept our promise to the community. We said, you come up with an option, and we considered it. And we got thousands of comments, and thoughtful people put hours into those comments in many cases, saying these are the pros and cons to all of this. And for all of that to shake out, and then in a survey, which the survey company is a statewide company, said that they've never had that kind of a survey and get that kind of result. And I guess we have to chalk this up to school perceptions being, they can put that one in the win column. I mean, they had predicted that it could pass by at least a 55-45 margin, and I think they were still within the margin of error, but it was just barely, and that was on the positive side. Anyone else want to comment on the post-referendum, the feedback that we're getting? Bruce, or I'm sorry, Rob.
Rob, Bruce, same. You know, I had somebody liken this to when the Red Sox finally won the World Series. You know, you take all that time, and finally the curse of the Bambino was gone. And I've heard, we are no longer a community divided. You know, there's such a sense of let's move forward together as a community. It's just refreshing and overwhelming at the same time.
Bruce?
Just quick, I made some comments the following morning at Rotary, and I think the one thing that I recognized was after the last referendum failed was the day where people really started to, I think, really work together. I mean, that day afterwards, there's been no question that this community is behind education. It's just trying to come up with a compromise and work together to get there. And there were three common themes that I talked about that I think this community really worked through, and that was working with grace and gratitude at the core, having courage because there were a lot of tough discussions that people had and a lot of compromise that people had to work through, and ultimately it came down to a lot of great teamwork across the entire community, across the board, across the administration. Tremendous support from our partners. I think we have to look at the work that Brian, you and your team did with all of the meetings and the travel, all of the work that Matt and Bray did with their participation in countless meetings. I think that I've heard comments from people at how great it was to have those experts at meetings participating and providing input as part of the process. So really exceptional, and I think that we have a tremendous future ahead of us here in Hudson, something that everyone's very excited about.
Just one more thing.
Rob.
I think, the public has entrusted the district with a substantial amount of money, and I think the work, as Dr. Nick had alluded to earlier, has just begun. We've been, again, entrusted with a lot, and I think, there's a lot of opportunity here for us to show the community that, we're going to stand behind what we've told them.
Right. And we really appreciate the community's trust in that regard, appreciate their positivity at this point and their enthusiasm, and not to be a downer, but we do need to implore people to be patient as well. If you think about when it was announced that they were going to do a referendum about the dog track and potential purchase of the dog track for a site, and you think about that was in the fall of 2011. We're actually closer to that time than we are to when this project is going to be done, in the fall of 2019. So we have, a long ways to go yet. There's a lot of hard work ahead of us, but I think that I get the sense that we're going to be doing it as a community together.
Mr. President?
Yes?
The comments that I've heard, for one thing, I think it's the location that pushed this through. Many people have said to me that they voted no before because they did not like that location, but they would absolutely support this because it was staying right where it needed to be. Because that's where Hudson High School needs to be, is right where it is. So that was really refreshing. That it was a compromise. Those that wanted a brand new building somewhere realized they're not going to get it, so they compromised on this. And those that wanted to repair this realized it was going to cost them more money than they thought it would. So that was a compromise on their part. So it was a compromise on both sides, I thought. I think that the sense in the community that I'm getting is a relief that we don't have to go through this again.
Yeah. Yes. Amen.
There's a big sense of relief that basically is saying, oh God, we're going to do this now. We don't have to go through another referendum. We don't have to go through all this yes and no and up and down stuff. It's actually going to happen. So, you know, I had abstained from voting to go to referendum, and I said at that time, well, just let the people decide, and they have decided, and they have spoken very loudly and very clearly by the margin of the yes votes. So we need to get on with it. We need to get on with it and be a good steward of their money, because as Rob said, they're trusting us with a lot of money. They're trusting us with big, big projects, and as Nick said, this is the largest referendum ever in the state of Wisconsin that did not involve new buildings. So they're trusting us. We need to get on with it and show them that we are going to be very good stewards of their trust and their money.
Well, is there any other comments then with that? Because on the subject of money, turn it over now to the next report. Brian, are you ready to give us an update on the referendum financing? And somebody gave me a little preview. I actually read it and saw that it's good news. So yes.
Good evening. Congratulations.
By the way, I want to introduce Brian Brewer from Baird. So Brian's been here so long, I think we should have just a name plaque for you.
At least I get the adult chairs tonight as opposed to the little kid chair from one of those meetings. Again, congratulations to everyone, all the committees, the community. This has been a long process. I have been fortunate enough to be here for 13 years to work with the district through the various options. It is a large project. There is a lot of time and effort that will continue to go into it. Tonight, I'll go through some slides that we've been prepping for in case of a successful referendum. We had briefed finance with what it could look like at its February meeting. And it's actually, the market so far has gotten a little better since February, so that's good. Everything you'll see here tonight, though, I will caution, you know, the market will change. It will continue to move until we are in position to finalize. So, you know, be excited that what I'm going to show you is under the referendum estimates, but that was by design. We wanted to go in conservative, knowing that if the market moved against us, we had some room. So far, the market has not moved against us, so we are showing some cost reductions below what you were projecting during the referendum. So with that caveat to start the presentation, there we go. So the brief overview of the agenda is I'll walk through a snapshot of interest rates, where we are relative to historical levels, talk about some of the financing illustrations, go through the base illustration that we had been using in the referendum planning estimates, and as well as what some alternatives would look like given the fact that rates are currently lower than what we had been estimating, and then discuss a sample timeline for putting the district in position to lock in the long-term interest rates. So this is one of my favorite charts. If you've been here when I've been here presenting, I like this chart because it's a daily index of municipal bonds, and it shows by maturity the movement in interest rates. It's not specifically Hudson's interest rates, but it's the general market movement in interest rates. The three lines on here represent a 5-year, which is the bottom line, the 10-year rate, which is the red line in the middle, and then a 20-year rate, which is the top line. You'll notice I've put some circles on here, primarily to illustrate the start of 2016. We've approached and are in close proximity of establishing a new low in this 30-year history. What I did was I circled the previous times when we had established a new low, really to help draw your attention to, how tenuous. When you set a new low, investors tend to get skittish on, am I buying the last bond at this low rate and then rates tomorrow will go up and now I own something that's out of the market. So in those three previous time periods, rates moved higher relatively quickly. So one of the things you'll notice between the base illustration and these updated illustrations is the timing. We had planned for potentially locking the first issuance later this fall. Is September was kind of the target. But given the fact that we are testing new historical lows, what you'll see is the timeline is accelerated into trying to potentially lock in the long term in late May at the earliest. So that's what this illustration was for. So this chart, I like it. I added it just in case you don't like line charts. It's the same data you were looking at on the previous page, but what this chart represents is the index that I showed you on the previous page, and it's a 15-year snapshot. So going back to 2001, the gray bars in each year represent the high point of interest rates and the low point of interest rates. So I think that's kind of cool to see in the 15-year period of time how much movement in rates there have been in each of these maturities. If you focus in on the dark blue line at the very bottom of the gray bar range, that represents what the current index rates are. So saying that a different way, we were awfully close to the lowest points all across each year maturity in a repayment schedule of the last 15 years, which makes sense if you think back to the previous slide. We are approaching those historical lows. There have been a couple points where we've been lower, but we're still in a spot where interest rates are very, very favorable. So the structuring goals throughout the referendum have been to target the 90-cent increase over the current payments for debt, phase the financings to give future flexibility to the board should the project come in under budget, to pay down debt quicker should our assumptions be more conservative or too conservative throughout the process. And then ultimately the goal would be to minimize the total financing cost. Some of the structuring assumptions that you'll hear me talk about is the district's long-term credit rating is currently a AA1 by Moody's Investor Service, which is one notch off of their highest that they offer. And repeatedly, the analysts in the conversations that Tim and I have been on the phone with say that you're doing everything within your control as a board to manage the financial operations. It's really just the size of the district's tax base. So currently the district's total taxable property is a little over $3.6 billion. And so relative to AAA rated entities, they're typically larger than that. So right now it's outside of the board's control, but if you continue to manage finances the way that you've been managing them historically, we will keep pressing them on the phone call when they're evaluating the credit of the district. The referendum planning estimates were a 3.75 for the first borrowing and a 4% for each of the second two borrowings. The structure was to repay debt in all years, starting year one out to year 22. It was a 22-year repayment, and even though the schedule that we used looked odd in how you were locking in those maturities, every single maturity, every single year, you're going to be paying down principal. Okay, so I think that got lost in how the illustration looked, but just know that when you're being asked by your constituents. We've been factoring in for the aid impact of this new expenditure, so that's always been calculated in the 90 cents. And we've been planning for a debt prepayment provision as of 10 years. So on a 20-year repayment schedule, the last 10 years are eligible to be refinanced or prepaid as of that 10th year. Okay?
Which could save interest cost and things along those lines.
Correct,
Okay.
correct. And the reasons I've been here in the last 5 years have been to refinance previous debt, such as Rivercrest or some of the previous referendum debt. So that's where that call option comes into play, is that ability to refinance to lower your interest costs. So this page, and there's 4 more that look like this, so I apologize about the size of the font. this is the detailed financing plan. This was the base illustration that we were using, where we structured 3 financings in each of 2016, 2017, and 2018. We structured the example illustration with issuing $45 million in 2016, $25 million in 2017, and then $20 million in 2018. Again, part of that was to give future flexibility to the board, but ultimately to repay over a 22-year period. And knowing that this wasn't set in stone, this was just an illustration based on the planning estimates that we were using. As I mentioned, we were planning for a September type borrowing for the 2016, using a planning rate of a 375, and then a 4 and a 4. Let me go this way. The total principal is $90,400,000. The total interest estimate in this base illustration was $45 million. And then the total aid impact is about $9 million, for a total referendum cost of about $145 million over that 22-year payback period. Targeting the 90-cent increase over current payments for debt, which were 97 cents. So your new payment for debt is $1.87. Okay?
And that's just for the first 8 years, is that correct? And then
That's
you see
how
it drop
this
off.
illustration was structured, is for
Okay.
the first 8 years, correct? So this was the base. What this next slide does is I took the same structure and all I did was update the 45 million in 2016. I moved the date up to July, which would allow the district to lock in late May. And I updated the rates to interest rates as of last week. So instead of a 375, the current blended average of each of these maturities is a 3.13. So leaving the 4% assumptions alone, just changing the interest rates on the first 45 million will reduce the estimated interest carrying cost by $5.6 million under those referendum planning estimates. It's not savings because it's cost avoidance, if you will. We were conservative during the process. This would be actual versus conservative planning estimates. So right now, just using the base illustration, you would be about 5.6 million under the referendum estimate. So then, when I met with finance in February, we took that knowledge and said, well, what would it look like if you locked in more of the long-term debt now when you know rates are near 30-year lows, knowing full well that you're not going to spend the bulk of that until 2017, so you're locking in monies earlier than you need them. However, what you are locking in is the known interest rate levels. So this alternative 1 illustration says instead of 45 million, let's lock in 70 million, still keep a 3 issuance structure, so you leave 10 million for 2017 and 10 more million for 2018, and you're still making your final payoff in 2038, so 22 years from now. So using those exact same interest rate schedule that I used for the previous slide, because you're paying off more debt on the shorter repayment term, it blends your average rate to a 2.83 versus the planning estimate of a 3.75. What that does to your total interest rate estimate is it reduces it by approximately $5 million more, so about $10.6 million under the referendum estimates. Okay? Still maintaining the $1.87. So all referendum assumptions the same. So then Nick and Tim and I started talking about additional illustrations, and we came up with alternative 2, where we said we want some future borrowing to be able to either not ever borrow or to change how we want to repay it based on the updated growth assumptions or interest rate assumptions that will be there throughout this 3-year time period that we had established. But what if we lock in the most we feel we can comfortably lock in 2016, so that we know that we've locked in debt that currently is averaging a 2.8%. You've locked in the interest cost on 8/9 of your borrowing. And currently, you'd be on track for reducing the interest cost related to the total financing plan by $13.8 million. Yes. I was hoping you would smile. So this illustration is, again, keeping all of the referendum assumptions the same with structuring. The biggest difference in this one is what I highlighted here. Instead of paying it off in 22 years, you're now paying your debt off in 21 years. So your final payment is in 2037 because you've used that interest cost savings to pay down your debt quicker. Okay? So it's still keeping at $1.87 for 8 years. It's still assuming only 2% growth for the first 3 years, and then 1% growth thereafter. And it would put you on track to be over $13 million under the referendum estimates. Okay? So then, that wasn't good enough for Nick.
I'm sorry, can I interrupt?
So then, we said, well, yeah, sure.
Can I, before you go further, can I ask, can you explain again what the aid loss figure is?
Yes. So in Wisconsin, there's the state equalization aid formula that funds school expenditures at differing percentage reimbursements. And there's 3 different levels that the district receives. So for the first $1,000 per student a school district spends, that's the highest reimbursement percentage. For the next $8,400 that a district spends per student, that's the secondary aid percentage. That's generally the middle point of the reimbursement level. For the district, both of those are positive reimbursements, so you get money from the state for those expenditures. But the final tier is called tertiary aid reimbursement, and that level is based on whether it's positive or negative reimbursement is based on your property value per student relative to the statewide average property value per student. So right now, as of this 15-16 school year, Hudson's property value per student is higher than the statewide average by exactly 12.32%. Okay, so it's an equalization formula that takes money from more property wealthy per student districts and redistributes it to less property wealthy per student districts. So that's what we've been factoring in because we wanted to try and factor in all the potential impacts to the local taxpayer related to the new principal and interest. So not only were we factoring in the principal and interest estimate, we were also factoring in the potential for state aid loss in that formula. Yeah, and it changes every single year. So this is the 15-16%, but it's really just a mix of how did Hudson's property value per student grow relative to the rest of the state.
I think that much of that also has to do with new properties that are being built within the district that increases the value of our equalized value with respect to the values in the rest of the state.
Correct.
So it's something that changes every year. I actually don't like I think it stinks, but what am I? The state isn't going to listen to me, but I don't like the way it's done, but it is what it is. We have to put up with it because it is what it is.
We'll send them this video.
All right, tell them.
I apologize if this is clear to everyone else, but with this percentage staying the same every year, why is our aid loss going down based on the interest rate?
Because it's
the financing
the
interest rate.
reimbursement the either positive reimbursement or negative reimbursement is based on how much you spend. So the fact that you're spending in this illustration $13 million less means you lose less state aid. That's why the aid loss line item is actually getting better, right?
Hey, Brian.
Does that make sense? Yeah, okay.
May I ask? Oh, I'm sorry.
In this model, borrowing number 2, you show an average interest rate of 3.5% versus the 4.
Yes, and that's mainly because of the changing repayment structure here. So here, it was more backloaded.
Okay.
So I left it at a 4. Here, it was more, you're paying off like 3 million or so, 2 million, I guess, in here, and 1.6 up here. So it just blends out. That's what it's for. But you're right. I mean, that's where these next 2 slides go to, though, is we don't know necessarily what 2017, or even if you would borrow that 10 million in 2017, you may decide to wait until early 2018 until more of the bidding is done, so that you may not ever borrow it. But the point of this is you're locking in the bulk of the interest cost in the known environment of where we currently are. So that's a good point. You have flexibility as to what the repayment structure on that 10 million is.
And does this take into consideration any escrow interest benefit? I mean, it'll be negligible, I'm sure, but.
No, not right now. Like the fact that you're borrowing in this illustration 80 million in 16, and the bulk of the payments would start in 17, so you're going to earn something. It's not going to be a big number, like a big interest rate, but you will accrue something, which can then go to offset, the debt repayment or project cost. Any other questions before I move into the illustration?
Just one more. As we go through these models and our total cost is going down, what risks are going up? Or is there more risk getting the largesse of the borrowing amount at the beginning?
Yeah, so the biggest risk of this these last couple of models is that you will have locked in knowing, you're saying I'm looking at the last 30, and it goes back further than that. We're in near historical lows. You lock it in. If rates don't go up in a year or 2 years, you could have avoided some interest carrying cost if you were able to hypothetically lock in the exact same amount a year or 2 out. So that is a theoretical risk of locking in more now than.
Brian, can you go back to your first, the interest rate slide, with the spikes. With the spikes. So we had this conversation several times. If you look at when we've hit historical lows, they're almost always followed by a jump. And in some of these places, within 13 months, and I think it was in the 2013 time period, interest rates doubled. And so there could be the potential, if interest rates doubled, from 2.5% to 5%, it could be a gamble that we could incur quite a bit more interest cost. And so being as conservative as we are with public funds, the thought was, as Brian will say, bird in hand versus not. And so although we'll carry some interest cost associated with having that money on hand and not necessarily needing it right away, we think that the risk of waiting is too great to not lock in as much as we possibly can, because what we've seen historically is when we get to these historic lows, within a year to 2 years, we see pretty reasonably high spikes in rates. Now get to the good scenarios that I forced you to do.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, so remember I led with all of this is preliminary until we're able to lock it in, and so Nick said, this is great. I see what you're doing. We've shortened it from 22 years to 21 years. Well, what if we, instead of stopping the $1.87 at 8 years, using the exact same referendum illustrations, what would happen if we just picked a 10-year point at which we keep the $1.87 levy, the 2% growth, the 1% growth, all that stays the same. The only difference here is What if we levy at $1.87 for 2 more years and pay down debt more quickly? What can that do to the interest cost?
Still not over what we told people during the referendum, which was $1.87.
Right.
And we even said potentially for the entire 20 years is what we had told people, 90-cent increase over current for 20 years.
So big red bold, what if, hypothetically, this is the part of the schedule that changes. And Rob, you remember you asked me amortization-wise, I had 4 smaller maturities in here. Now I was able to have 2 larger maturities in year 9 and 10. So by paying off debt quicker, you're accruing less interest cost. And so over here in the lower right corner, it goes up to about 14 million, a little over 14 million in terms of a cost reduction versus the previous estimate of 13.8. So those 2 years would save an additional $300,000 paying down debt quicker. But then the optimist said, the 2% estimate on property value growth that we've been using, given all this going on in the community, may be low. We may be too conservative. So what flexibility does the board have to restructure to structure the 10 million that's remaining to pay it off more quickly should growth come in faster, right? If you keep it at the $1.87 and instead of growing at 2%, you grow at 5%, that's going to be additional dollars to be able to pay down debt. So the next schedule says, what if we target $1.87 for 10 years and assume 5% growth for the 3 years and then 1% thereafter, as opposed to 2% for 3 years and 1% thereafter? What does that do? Well, it not only allows you to amortize the debt significantly faster, you also are able to eliminate another year of the repayment term. So we started at 22 years. The base alternative 2 gets you to 21 years and puts you in position, should that growth come in faster than we were estimating, the ability to pay this final 10 million off if you even need to borrow the full 10 million. You can pay it off in 10 years, which would then mean you've paid the entire plan off in 20 years. So you've shaved 2 years off of the repayment schedule, which, as you all know, the shorter we can repay the debt, the less interest carrying cost, which under this scenario, it would reduce your interest carrying costs by a little over 17 million in that scenario.
And the 5% is not just a number out of thin air. The 5% we actually had over the last 15 years an average growth rate of 5.5%. So it would be as if we continued to grow for the next 3 years, value-wise, as if we had for the last 15 on average, and then stopped basically at a 1% increase after that. So not even carrying 5% for the whole cost or the whole repayment schedule, but just for the 3 years. And so I think that, and I think the other thing that's important for people to see is when you look at this repayment plan, whether it be this one or any of the other ones, when we get into years 11 through 20, or 11 through 21, is we are not at $1.87 anymore. We're actually much less than $1.87, with getting as low as $1.29. And so it's going to continue to drop. And so, but that also brought up another question that we had for Brian was, okay, but we have some of these bonds, 6 million, 7 million, 5 million, that are, 18-year bonds, 19-year bonds, 20-year bonds. What happens if we have tremendous growth value, and we can, at the $1.87, generate enough funds to pay those down earlier? How can we put ourselves in a position to do that to save even additional interest costs? And then Brian talked through it.
Yeah, and so that's why we put this bar, the dotted box across the 10th year, because basically anything below that, any of these maturities in here are prepayable at that point. So if this scenario plays out over the next 10 years and the board levies $1.87, pays down this 10 million more quickly, and you're still at a spot where you could levy to continue to pay down debt, the next thing you would start paying down is this final maturity over here, this $6,020,000, which again starts to continue to reduce interest costs. This plan gives you that, you and future boards, that flexibility to choose how to pay down that debt based on the new data points that come over the next few years.
So I have a question.
Sandy?
When you get to the 2026, where the levy starts to drops to $1.76 and then $1.43 and goes down from that, what would happen, and would it be possible to just leave it at the $1.87 until, and not drop it all those years? How quickly would it get paid off then?
Have you and Nick been talking? Because that was another thing I ran. I didn't show it here because I was leery of showing these savings at this point.
No, Nick and I haven't been talking, but we probably think the same.
Yeah. So I did run a scenario where you keep your levy at the $1.87 mill rate,
Right.
and then try to continue to pay down the debt quicker.
How much does it save?
Yeah, it would knock another 2 or 3 years off of the 20-year, then it would be 19,
Right.
then it would be 18. So.
And how much more interest over here on that?
I stopped because I would have to make some assumptions as to when we would make that decision. So I can run that if you want to see the savings on that, but that's.
It's in the millions, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you were able, depending on when you were able to levy, because again, this was just the 5% for 3 years, 1% thereafter. If you go 5% for 3 years and like 4% in the fourth year, that changes all the assumptions. So.
And that payoff, that is something that the boards at that time would make that decision at that time. We're not getting locked into anything
Every year
now.
every
Every year you
year.
decide.
Every
Okay.
year you get to decide what that debt service mill rate is, as long as it's high enough to cover
Right.
to cover the payments you have to make for that year. So I think the big thing from tonight, to kind of push on through, is what Brian really needs from the board is some type of direction or consensus prior to the May 10th meeting of, do you like the idea of trying to lock in more debt on the first issue, which would be the $80,400,000, and then having a second issue of $10 million versus the original base assumption? Because it would be the administration's recommendation that we would try to lock in as much debt as we could at this point, where we have what we think are probably some of the best interest rates ever. I'm not saying they couldn't go down, but at least we don't have a crystal ball. And so if that was the case, then he would start putting together the packages associated with a first issue of $80,400,000, and then based on how bids come back in, if bids come in really low and we don't need to borrow the last 10, we don't have to borrow it. But it still gives us that flexibility to not have to borrow it, but it doesn't give us a tremendous amount of interest rate exposure if rates were to double.
I would speak in approval of what you've just said, doing with the $80,400,000 in the first round to get that interest rate. That's really a great interest rate, and we have no guarantee. And I know, being in the industry I'm in, how much they can go up and down even a couple of months' time. And with this much money, if they go up even a little bit, you're talking about a lot of interest. Mm-hmm. So I'd be very much in favor of locking in that $80,400,000 as soon as you can at this rate.
I agree.
So just an idea, and Brian and I were talking about this, so on the $90 million total, for every percentage point the interest rate goes up, you would pay an additional $13 million roughly, $12 million in interest. And so when you start thinking about that historic chart, if they doubled, it could be a tremendous amount of interest the taxpayers would be on the hook for.
So each 1% equals 12 million more in long-term
Interest cost on the full 90 million.
On the full 90 million.
On the full 90.
I
So
think that
what
that
we're
would-
weighing, it's starting to sound like a no-brainer, but on the 80 million, what we're talking about is up front, you're increasing your cost because instead of doing 45 million on that first year issue in July or September or whatever, and you do 80 instead, you're paying that blended interest rate of 2.8% about a year sooner than you would on that increment.
On the additional
On the
35
additional.
million.
On the additional 35.
Right, which
so doing the quick math, that's an extra million that you're paying to do it sooner, but you're saving 17 million in the long run.
Yeah. So the concept is accurate. The extra carrying cost, because this is the spot where the extra 35 million is put. The rates in there are even lower because, as we talked about, year one's the lowest, and it gets to the highest as the last. So the rates in here range from like 1 to 2.25. So your blended average
For those first 10 years is even lower.
Is even
Got it.
lower than that. So I ballparked it at like 450,000, taking into account some of the earnings potential in that calculation. And then if you take that same 35 million and have interest rates go up by 0.25%, like 0.25, it's 700,000 of extra interest carrying costs if we wait and do it here versus locking it in here. So it doesn't take very much of a movement to offset that additional carrying cost that you'd be incurring on that additional 35 million.
And those circles that you had on that prior one showed basically a 2% spike, so that's...
Yeah, and again, there's different things going on in each of these, but it's really the conversation of when rates get this low and they stay there for a period of time, investors start to get jittery, and they're looking for any sign, like today, rates went up a little bit today because oil prices rebounded because their production levels were going to be contained based on an agreement in Saudi Arabia, right? So there's lots of things that will go into moving these, which again is why I'm always cautious with these rates, and I know I'm a broken record with that, but you know, what happened here was the Detroit bankruptcy taper tantrum where the Fed started to say they were going to taper their active buying. You know, there's a number of things still going on in the market that are keeping these rates at abnormally low levels. So that's all factoring into this conversation about let's take as much, lock it in for the 20-year period, keep 10 million to be flexible with as to when you actually issue it, if you actually issue it, and then make those decisions based on data points thereafter.
Not have to, if the bids come in lower, then we may not even have to do that last 10 million of borrowing.
Right, that 10 million is roughly reflects about 15% or 14%, if the bids came in 14% under what the total estimate.
They would have to come in almost 15% under budget for us to not need any of that 10 million and none of the fund balance.
Right.
And so really what we're just looking for tonight is a general consensus that they, you know, there's no action, but consensus that you like the plan of 80 million first issue, 10 million second issue.
I have one other question before we decide that. If you borrow the 80,400,000 right away, and we were originally going to do 45, where does the rest of the money sit while we're waiting to use it?
It gets invested in a project account. Historically, the district has utilized PMA for investment of proceeds. So they invested in U.S. Treasury investments, basically anything limited to your school district policy.
Earning maybe what, 1 or 1.5%?
Not even
right
right now.
Okay.
I mean, just with the rest of rates as low as they are, you know, you're looking at investing these dollars over maybe a 2 to 3 year type period.
Okay.
So it's going to be very short and very low interest rate investment return.
All right, so do you need a motion? to do
No,
this?
just
Is
a
that
general
an agreement?
consensus, because you guys aren't actually deciding anything.
Formal motion would be the next meeting on May 10th.
I have a couple comments. One, Baird is not the fiduciary, right? You're not loaning us the money.
Correct.
It will be loaned, we find someplace to loan us the money, right?
Correct. We're
Okay.
the intermediary. So the term for it is underwriter.
Underwriter.
So we are
Okay.
finding the investors that are ultimately going
Okay.
to add up to the 80 million or 90.4
Okay.
million on the day of final pricing. So the day that you're going to lock in the rates, we're matching up those investors with the bond structure that the district puts together.
Okay, thank you. And secondly, to me, as you know, I'm on quote-unquote a fixed income, but I'm not suffering. But, you know, you still get a little bit more every year, a little bit more every year, and so on. So people that are still, you know, working and they gain more income and so on, I would think that we could say that $187 looks less, you know, less challenging to our pocketbooks. So, you know, as we go to 10 years, $1.87 per thousand is not as astounding, I think, to our pocketbooks and to our budgets. So that's a positive card for me, too.
If I may ask
Anyone else? Yes.
separate, sort of off-topic question. As far as the valuation for the district, where does our district valuation need to be to qualify for a top Moody's rating, do you think?
Yeah, it's a good question. They do not tell you that. You know, other AAA rated school districts in Wisconsin, like Elm Brook, for instance, I'm working on an issue for them. They're 7 billion, like 7.5 billion, and they're AAA rated. Nicolay High School District near Milwaukee County. Wauwatosa is another one. Middleton Cross Plains. And I'm missing one.
So about 7 billion, you think?
Yeah, I mean, right. But it's right. It's size and its diversity of the property valuation. So residential versus industrial versus commercial versus, so there's a mix of things in there that, potentially Hudson doesn't really want to have in its community, right? I mean, it's a nice blend of things, but, AA1, you're getting to most investors, because that's the whole point of it. Just like your personal credit score, you want the most lenders to want to lend to you, right? That's the same concept of what this third-party rating agency process is they're doing their evaluation via their rubric, comparing you versus other options in the marketplace, and assigning that letter grade, and being one notch off the highest. There's not very many at the AAA, and so there's not a lot of supply at the AAA. So the next category, that those types of investors that are looking for the very safest of investments, the next one down is AA1. So, we talk about it, we continue to position it. It would be great to be able to say, but you're getting awfully close to the best rates that a Wisconsin school district can borrow in the marketplace.
All right. Any other questions? Otherwise, you're going to prepare all this for us for the next meeting?
Yeah, so the timing, this final page is just the timeline. So at the May 10th meeting, there we go. The May 10th meeting, you would have an action item. So there'd be 2 resolutions for action that night. The one is to issue what's called a bond anticipation note, which provides interim construction funding to fund that project account and begin the investment process. The second resolution would establish parameters for issuing the 20-year long-term debt, and it would delegate the final sign-off to the president and treasurer. This is what we have done on the previous few borrowings, which gives a little more flexibility to the district to be able to lock in their rates in between the regularly scheduled once-a-month board meetings. And ideally, the target time frame for locking in that would be that Tim and I can get the paperwork and the prospectus and the credit rating all in line by that 3rd or 4th week in May, to lock in rates. Okay. And then, schedule for a closing on that as of July 1, or after July 1, so that it's into the next fiscal year from an accounting standpoint. But that's the general timeline. And, so the next step from a board action standpoint would be those 2 resolutions.
I understand the second resolution. Why do we need the first resolution about the interim construction costs if we've got $3.5 million sitting in our secondary space fund?
It's to have Baird serve as the underwriter on the issue. It needs to be able to refund a construction note. So if we were to not do that step, the option would be to put it out for bids to underwriters that then can't manage the process and get bonds offered to local
That's kind of
investors.
like insurance then.
Yeah. So it's a step in the process. You're right. It doesn't add a lot of value, but it's really to get you to that flexibility of the parameter resolution and being able to offer bonds to local investors and financial institutions here in town.
All right. Any other questions?
Great work.
All right. Thank you, Brian. Thanks for that detailed report, and we'll look forward to seeing you next month then.
And thanks for such good news.
I wish I had control over it, but I just keep reporting the news.
Just keep our fingers crossed. Keep saying your prayers.
Yeah.
All right.
Have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to topics for action, and I'll entertain a motion on the consent items.
Mr. President, I move approval of the consent items and that the Director of Financial Services be authorized to pay bills in the amount of $1,476,186.10.
Second.
Motion by Lynn, second by Sue. All those in favor of approving the consent items, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Passes. Next on the agenda is the branding initiative. And who's going to be presenting? We have multiple people.
We have multiple presenters. So we have Tracy, I'll let you kind of introduce everyone and talk through the branding initiative. And I know Tricia Christensen is coming up and Joel Skinner. So.
Tonight I'm being joined by Tricia Christensen from Christensen Creative. Tricia's been working with us for several years on this branding process, along with Joel Skinner, who was part of the Raider Council and also has been working on this initiative for several years. Both have worked and supported our effort. Both have agreed to do work with us pro bono, which is great to have that community support. What you have up on the screen is a brand and user guide, and you get to see, before you go on, Tim, just keep it on that front page first, so people can see our logo. So that is the updated Raider image for us, and this document is available online, and it's kind of our guide as we move forward in this process. It talks about the rationale for doing this rebranding and bringing us together as one Raider community, and it talks certainly about the culture of excellence that we have here in Hudson and really bringing our brand to that level. And do you want to say anything, Tricia, about that process in rebranding?
Yes, I can speak to the rebranding. I think one of the challenges with the Raider brand historically has been that Hudson has a diversity of groups that doesn't necessarily fit all under one mark. And I think one of the things our team tried to do is evaluate the components of what Raider Pride means, what would be the flexible elements within the existing Raider brand, being a knight, a horse, a shield, and the H, and then creating a construct of flexible elements that could be used not only for sports, but for forensics and arts and groups at all levels throughout the entire school system. And then also creating basically a library of guidelines, making sure everybody's within the same blue. Every H is the same H. Really everything should be consistent, regardless if they're using the different components within the branding. Raider Pride across the board for all Hudson groups should feel like Hudson Raiders. So really taking a 30,000-foot view and then trying to dive deep. And this is an ongoing process. I think Tracy knows we actually have several months in front of us, creating additional marks for a lot of the groups within the school district. A lot of rules.
So part of rolling out a new brand and the work on the part of the district is also working with community, our internal and external groups who may want to use the brand. And this is a significantly different project than what we proposed or were thinking about several years ago with the Raider Council. And Tim, if you can forward to that final page, which is really about our permissible use agreement, and Joel's been working with us on that, and also about registering our mark. But really what we've put into place is a fairly simple process for folks, and it's really about us being able to manage how our mark is used, both, again, internally and externally. And that control, for lack of a better word, is really about where is this mark placed. We certainly don't want our mark put on cigarette packages or alcoholic beverages. I mean, those are things that we want to control for. And so what is set up here is a fairly simple process for either local vendors or parent groups or primarily, I mean, those are usually the groups that approach us, boosters, youth athletic groups, that they would contact myself or working directly with principals or Steph DeVos with the athletic department. And then we go through the process of, how's the mark going to be used? And then there's a fee for nonprofit groups, a $10 annual fee for that use. And then for anybody who would be a for-profit group and who may want to make up, let's say, T-shirts and want to sell those locally. They can do that. That fee is that $100 annual fee. And then it's just a communication between the communications office and that particular vendor, for-profit vendor, to so that we know how that image is being used. Do you want to say anything more, Joel, about that process?
How about that? Good. On this, for educational institutions like Hudson School District are probably relatively low, and that's good and simple on the spectrum of complexity for brands and for from both the creative stuff and probably certainly the law. I mean, we're not the Badgers and we're not Notre Dame. I think you touched on probably the big two big benefits of kind of legally managing and commercially managing the brand. Being able to step in if something really bad happens with disparagement. And then probably the biggest benefit of having a program like Tricia's set up is to be able to help your coaches and teachers when they need to use brand styles and designs to be able to make it easier for them to do that. Have one place they can look, have kind of a range of things they can do. So it's really just kind of management for internal benefits. What the law of the state of Wisconsin likes with branding programs is that you have exclusivity. And when we first started this program, when Steph DeVos got Tricia and I together 3 or 4 years ago, we did a search and found out a lot of the things that the Hudson School District was doing. It was the only school district in the state doing that in terms of using the combination of colors and design elements and styles. So we're doing a pretty good job with that. So exclusivity, continuousness, we looked and found the school district had been doing a long time, so that was good. So the third component is inconsistency, and that's where I think over time when no one was looking at it in detail like we did for the first time 3 or 4 years ago, that was slipping just a little bit, the consistency of use. So this program is really gonna make the consistency of use of the brand a lot better. So from a personal perspective, if I can be a little test case with this, I'm pretty change adverse. So when I first looked at it, I thought, you've got exclusivity, you've got the continuous nature, maybe we can live with the consistency and just dress it up a little bit. So I was kind of in favor of let's just tighten it up. And I was a little skeptical about a total rebranding, but when you see this stuff, it's really amazing. It's really high quality.
I will also say in the process, when we started this several years ago, we talked to multiple users of the Raider image at that particular time. And the feedback that we did receive was the one component that people really hold dear here is that block H. And so that was the piece that they wanted to make sure. Obviously, we wanted to continue a Raider, but that Raider, and I think, Tricia, you created a Raider once before, back in high school.
Sure.
Yep. So, the Raider has changed. This isn't the first time. This is a new look to our Raider. But the feedback that we've gotten from many of our coaches has been very favorable to this more updated look.
So something I'd like to add, and we've talked about this in the past, that the rebranding is more than just creating logos for high school teams and high school events. It really is about rebranding the entire district. Our goal with this, as you can see in the rebranding guide, is that we have consistency across all levels of the school, elementary, middle school, and high school. And that because we're a single feeder system district, it's about when our kindergartners are coming, as I was just at kindergarten roundup today with my own child, they're junior Raiders, and they're coming into a program, and we're talking about the Raider way, and we're talking about the Raider code as it relates to PBIS, and we're talking about the Raider family, and it really is more than just a football logo or a forensic logo or something along those lines. It really is a sense of community when it comes to the district. I would be remiss if I didn't say how much appreciation we owe both Joel and Tricia, because all of this hard work has been done pro bono by them, and it's just been outstanding. They've donated the time to the district associated with our logos and our branding, and so we're very, very, very appreciative of those things. But I think as you look through the branding guide, you'll see that there are logos that have been built in for each individual school as far as what their school logos would be. Lots of options within the logo guide to have it be customizable but still keep the same theme. The guide that you don't have on here, but I think you can get access to, is the printer's guide that Tricia has come up with, which is probably more like 20 or 30 pages long of just all the different ways you can interchange this logo and put different things in it. And so we think that it gives a lot of flexibility, but at the end of the day, we want people to know that we are Hudson and we are Raiders, and that means something, and it's consistent across all of our buildings, regardless of which building you walk into in the district. So that's kind of the impetus behind a lot of this.
Mr. President?
Oh, excuse me. No, go ahead, Bruce.
I was going to say I've been a big fan of this as we've gone through this process and had a chance to see it. So first of all, thank you both. I know that you put a lot of time into this community, but to put more time here into this project is greatly appreciated. I've said this also in the past, and I'm firmly behind the Raider pride, right, and building that culture and the brand in our community. When we had a chance to go down to the the Wisconsin convention for school boards in Wisconsin here, at least 6, maybe 5 different schools got up and talked about building a brand, being proud of your school and your community. And it was, it was the Brown Deer way. Hayward had the Hurricanes or the Canes, and businesses had, posters up. Businesses were representing, what our school represented in the community. And it was something that everybody got behind in communities, and I think it's a great change, and wonderful to have something that we can be proud of and brand recognition within our community. Nice job.
Yes, Sue?
Comment. I don't know if it's trending or not in Wisconsin and Minnesota, but I went online to look at what other schools were developing guidelines, and I easily found about 6 or 7 in Wisconsin and about 5 in Minnesota. And in Minnesota also included Minnetonka. And now I couldn't find out how much they were charging or anything, but because many of them just said contact this person if you wanted the specifications and so on, which I think would make sense than putting them on your website. And then I just wanted to also say, Tricia, that I saw an earlier form of this logo, and I have an art background, so I'm always, being picky in those areas. But anyway, this has evolved beautifully. I was always looking at that shoulder, and I went from Spider-Man shoulder to this very beautiful, stylized
I know what you're
form
talking
that you
about.
have. I know, we talk. We know what to talk about, right? But no, anyway, it's quite stunning, so good work.
I had a question on, I think, Tim, on one of the slides, it says about I think it's the trade use agreement. Or
So wait, the final page.
final page? All right. Because I think on there, I know we're trying to promote continuity and consistency and all that. I don't know, this has obviously been up and talked about for a while. You guys have, this wasn't just overnight.
Right.
But the 2 weeks notice, because the predominant users of this are going to be parent groups who want to put together hooded sweatshirts for the swim team or for the lacrosse team when we get one. All right, so do they have, do
That's
they
really-
have to wait the 2 weeks and?
No, that's cushion for me. I can tell you right now, I'm getting requests frequently. And I've been, today alone, I probably responded to 3 requests for artwork. And using this, this format, was able to meet those requests. So, and also worked with Tricia again. School Age Care is in the process of putting together their summer T-shirts for their staff, and Tricia did a little tweaking on that so that it's identified as School Age Care. So that's all happened. Certainly well within that 2 week. That's really just there for.
So it's not like it's a mandatory,
No.
if they miss that 2 weeks, they're not gonna get their product in that time period or anything?
And one thing to understand is the $100 fee is for companies that want to sell standalone Hudson Raider gear.
Correct.
So for example, if the football team wants to do football T-shirts and they want to go to a local vendor to purchase those shirts, the vendor doesn't have to pay the $100 to do that order. It is just if the vendor wants to sell standalone Hudson Raider gear and equipment and stuff along those lines. So, but when the team does go to that vendor and the artwork is submitted to that vendor for use, it is only used for that order, and they don't have permission to continue to use that artwork unless they buy the permission to use it on other pieces of apparel. So I think that's an important piece because we do have a lot of groups within the school that would be seeking out vendors and different groups that would be printing things for us.
Mr. President?
Rob?
And so when we were in committee, we talked about rollout, which if I remember correctly, was about 18 months. And some of the conversation we had was, potentially, with, all the athletics, helmets, those things, but signage, letterhead, other things, there's going to be some cost. Do we have a sense of the timing of that rollout? Is it 18 months? And from a budget perspective, what that might mean?
So we're going to continue to develop the budget on the rollout. Part of a large portion of the rollout happens obviously at the middle school and the high school, and with the referendums passing, a lot of that will be built right into, as we're replacing signs at the high school, replacing, different things, that'll just be part of it. As far as if we just bought a uniform last year, we wouldn't dispose of a perfectly good uniform just because it doesn't have the most current logo on it. I mean, we wouldn't do that. Part of the reason why there's such a push to get this approved and get this done is because a lot of, I think our biggest selling time for apparel is probably in the fall. And you have a lot of vendors that are ordering their fall stuff now. They need 3 or 4 months lead time. And so we want to make sure that, we don't all of a sudden spring it on them and say, oh, hey, I'm sorry you ordered with all the old stuff, but now here's our new logo. And so, so there'll be some crossover there. We're working on what is the cost for, they're called monument signs or signs out in front of buildings, so they're consistent between all the elementaries. Some of the elementaries have just a wooden sign in front of them. So if we were going to put together a consistent sign in front of each elementary and middle school, what would it look like at the high school with the renovation? What would it look like at the middle school? Things along those lines. So all of those components are still being worked out. We'll work through that in the budget process over the next 6 months. But the goal is not to get rid of stuff that is perfectly fine. If it's good stuff, we're going to use it, and then as it needs to be replaced, replace it with the new stuff. It's a gradual thing.
Gradually as things come up.
It's not that you're going to vote on this tonight and then tomorrow we're replacing everything. So we don't have the resources quite afforded to us as a lot of companies when they merge and buy out. We immediately see a changeover. We'll be doing it gradually as things are replaced and move through. So
I have a couple of questions. It sounds like, Tracy, these requests are going to be coming to you, and you will be the one deciding if what they want to do with it is okay?
So far, yes, the requests have come in. As far as are they okay, so parent group has done some of those, school age care, softball teams. It's really the coaches working with Steph DeVos as far as the uniform piece. I just ultimately get we need artwork sent to. But
Okay.
I'm involved in that process. Just to make sure that we are, that the image isn't getting changed. That's really, my control piece is really just about making sure that the image is maintained and it's not being used on something that it should not be used on.
Okay, that's what I understood from the meeting the other night. I thought it was they fill this out, they bring it into you, you say, okay, you can put it on the shirts, whatever you want to do, and then you send the logo electronically to whoever they're going to have do it.
Right.
Do they have to come back, does that printer have to come back to you with a layout of the final artwork? I mean, maybe it's going to go on a shirt that already has something on it and the logo is going to be superimposed on top
The
of
school
something
district should
else.
see the final proof.
Okay, is that part of this?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. President, I just have one more.
Well, I think Sandy's, are you done with your questions, Sandy?
I had others, but you can go ahead.
Don't
and I
know,
can come back.
I would go in a different direction,
The
please.
question of the cost, that was addressed. There's really we don't know what the cost of changing everything in Hudson to this new logo is going to be. All the signs, letterhead, and all of the
So we would
things.
see it as a changeover as we need to replace
As we
things.
need it. Okay, all right. And then I understand that the elementary schools have traditionally had their own little like mascot logo type thing for each elementary school. Will the individual elementaries be allowed to continue to use their little mascot logo within their own building for anything?
No, what would happen is the original elementary mascot logos came from school age care. It's how they identified the different buildings. And so it wasn't as though it was historic to that elementary and, you know, that's when the building was dedicated. And so now all of a sudden we're changing mascots and things. But the logos or the animal, I think they're primarily animals, were associated with school age care and how the difference between North Hudson and Rivercrest and Willow River. So, no, the intent would be to be pretty strict on the branding and that we're all Raiders, whether we're in first grade or we're in 12th grade. And it may be painful, may get some pushback for a few months
I think you will.
yeah, but I think in the end, you know, you can either have a few months of saying no, or you can have a lifetime of trying to figure out why your brand isn't consistent. And so, yeah, so the expectation would be is that we're all Raiders moving forward.
And one last question, which we talked about a little bit at the meeting, enforcement. So what will happen if you see out there and walking around the streets or at some sporting event, shirts the kids have on that you know that it was not something that you approved of? What will happen? I mean, because I believe the printers that we deal with and the vendors, they all have logos from over the years that they probably have in their systems. If they are using those and do something, what?
If a vendor continues to use the old Raider?
Yeah, there's nothing.
No, I mean, really where we would see some type of legal course of action would be if there's a bar that wants to do a pub crawl and they want to put our
Right,
logo on a
okay.
cup. You know, I think this, and I would have to yield to the two attorneys sitting to the left of me.
Not me.
But
Be careful.
It would give us the legal authority to basically cease and desist, you know, that they need to stop using that. Obviously, if somebody uses the logo, I mean, it's primarily an honor system with our vendors. And with and with that, obviously.
So you're not going to refuse to let the kids wear shirts that
No,
have got a
we
different
don't
logo
have
on
the
them they should
manpower,
have?
nor do we want to tackle that. It's part of the
Right.
reason why we moved away from a royalty situation is because any amount of money we're going to generate from royalties will probably pale in comparison to the amount of effort it takes to enforce royalty distinction. And so, yeah, I mean, we would expect people to act, you know, appropriately and our vendors to act with, you know, the appropriate ethics. But yeah, our goal is not to police every piece of Raider wear out there.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Yep.
Thank you, and thank you for your patience with me.
Of course, Sandy. Final question, do we ever receive any deliberation or controversy or arguments over the idea of the presence of the sword in the design as a weapon? I mean, I know there's like 37.
The lance historically is a weapon. So I guess when we were doing the update, the sword's not in all the elements. I think people who want to use the Raider full with the sword would be a group that might be more of an aggressive, competitive nature. But historically, the Raider, I mean, that's not a showboating knight that's just out there for fun. That lance is a weapon. And I think the elements that we have, you don't have to use that. So there is the option of what you want to use to represent your group. Mhm.
And they don't have to have a horse either.
They
right?
don't. They can just be the H.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the branding initiative.
Okay, second. Motion by Lynn, second by Rob. Do we have further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Those opposed, the motion passes. Thank you for your work, and let's give them a round of applause. Okay, now we move on to one-to-one Chromebook, the lease purchase option, which we discussed previously.
Take maybe a 5-minute recess. We're going about 2 hours.
Okay.
We don't have to, but.
Is there anybody, would you care for a 5-minute break? Okay, so we'll go a 5-minute break. Board members, get back to your chairs, and let's call the meeting back into order. Yeah, we'll just, who's introducing the one-to-one Chromebook? Would that be you, Tim? And yeah, I mean, I think that we should preface the presentation that this is something the board has had multiple opportunities. Some committees have had it multiple times, and the whole board was given some information at our last work session. We didn't take any action on it, but feedback was given by board members. So this is the time where we're asking for formal action.
All right, so you want me to take it?
Sure,
Okay.
go Tim.
Yeah, and so to be brief, yeah, a lot of this is the same stuff that David prepared before and presented to you at various committees. And so it's taking and finishing that rollout for grades 6 through 12, and then also we're able to take some of those absorbed devices, and I'm looking at the chart that says one-to-one full rollout proposal right there. And then using some of those other additional devices that we already have, and instituting those in grades 3 through 5. The information really hasn't changed. That's all of the same. So we'll run through what the newer updated information here. So how we propose to do this, and I'll go to the next page, Tim, is through a lease. Went out to 3 different leasing companies, and we started to talk about what the lease costs might look like. And so what you see there is, initial equipment cost is $1,130,000 for roughly almost 3,600 units of Chromebooks. And the annual payments that were negotiated back and forth as we talked with the 2 lower companies, which were Vantage and American Capital. And so what results is Vantage would be actually the lowest cost provider of this equipment. So annual payments are over a 4-year lease, and annual payments would be $276 per year, and that 4-year totals $1.1 million, so it's slightly below the equipment cost. Part of that is we look at estimated residual value of those units. Those units are essentially they're owned by Vantage, so it's a true lease. We're not buying the units, we're just leasing those units. And the units after 4 years for a Chromebook, a very basic Chromebook, the residual value is not going to be much. What they're worth on the market is going to be pretty low. So we've kind of plugged in an estimate of what we think that could be. So that's roughly $20 per unit. And then we estimate something for units that don't work anymore, that type of thing. So that's really where the value is coming from for these companies to provide a lease. And then each one of those companies provided or required that first payment up front. So we'd make that payment in July. We'd order the Chromebooks as soon as possible this year, and then we'd be making that first payment to the lease company in July.
Tim, can I have a question about the 2 lower bids, Vantage and American Capital? So they're less than $4,000 apart per year. Was their lease basically the terms virtually identical, or are you getting the same service from Vantage as you would American Capital, or is American Capital worth that extra $4,000 a year?
They each have very similar lease terms and what they provide. So when we get, for example, we get done, you know, again, we're recommending Vantage at this point. But when we're done, Vantage, you know, we pack up the units, we send them back to Vantage because they're their units, they own them, and then they take care of it from there. So each one will do that. There's different types of leases, but really we wanted to go with when we look at equipment that has relatively little value, and you're looking at a pretty short-term lease, we wanted to look at what's a true lease, rather than something where we could do a dollar buyback option, we could do a fair market value buyback option. Those things don't really give us advantage, because then we have all this old equipment that's outdated and kind of obsolete, not worth much, and we're kind of sitting there going, what do we do with it? So this really helps deal with 3,500 units, 3,500 computers. It really helps deal with it on the back end as well. What I'll ask tonight is that you approve the one-to-one program and also the lease with Vantage Financial. So one thing we'll do, you see the lease agreement is several pages long, and so if you approve that, we'd like you to approve that pending legal review of the lease. This has been sent to our attorney for review, but we'd like you to approve it tonight so that we can get started on ordering the units.
Mr. President.
Lynn.
One quick question. Because it's a lease, are we required to insure it, or are there additional insurance costs that need to be addressed?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, we're required to insure the units, and we'll insure them under both. We'll insure them two ways. So we'll insure them for fire theft. That's just under a normal property policy. And then we may or may not, one of the things we've been kicking around is, if you scroll back up, you can see insurance costs. That's in the matrix, and that's running about almost $193,000 for 4 years. So that's a total for 4 years. And so we're looking at, what about the possibility of self-insuring these units? That might be a savings, or we're going to look at another company that would go in and insure them against breakage. So that's just kind of the second part of what need the.
So the 1.325 would be worst case scenario if we didn't do the self-insure.
That right. That would be the highest, probably the highest cost.
Okay.
Tim, I'm sorry. Is the 192,000 insured through Vantage?
Vantage does offer that.
Does not.
They do offer a program to insure. But we'll look at, what we want to do is look at all of our options. So we may want to look at other companies that provide insurance as well. And then again, looking at the possibility of self-insuring for this risk rather than paying out to an insurance company.
And then one other history thing, that if Dave was here, he reminded us each time, and that's why the board members have heard it 2 or 3 times, is that, the district had already committed to going to a one-to-one initiative, but it was just that it was going to go over a 4-year period of time. This accelerates that, and part of that reasoning for doing so was the cost savings. You should mention about the $100,000 we're saving per year.
Right. Yeah. The estimate is that this will take care of some of the other budget commitments from IT. So purchasing these will allow us to have some additional savings. So that's estimated about $100,000 per year.
And by purchasing them in the bigger quantity, 3 times as many as we normally would have on an annual basis.
Right. Yeah. The cost of the units themselves are about $277. So which is some pretty decent pricing. They looked at I think 2 or 3 other companies to get pricing on it. So this is through Tierney Brothers is the purchase, and their pricing was very competitive.
Okay. Great. Any other questions or comments? No. Questions of Tim? Anything else that we need to know? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to proceed.
Well, I would move that we accept the one-to-one Chromebook program, and to get them to have the purchase from Vantage Financial.
Second.
Oh, well, just to qualify, as a purchase, you mean
Lease.
the lease?
Lease, I'm sorry, purchase the lease from them.
All right.
Second.
Motion by Sue, second by Bruce. Any other comments or questions? And just so we're clear, this first payment actually goes into the next budget year of July of 20.
Right, yeah, well, yeah, that's structured to take that first payment, yeah, the first payment will occur in July.
All right. With that, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed to the motion? There are none. The motion passes. Next on the action items is the 2016-2017 staffing plan, and I'm assuming Andrea is going to help us with that.
Yes, I can certainly do that. So what you have in front of you is a document that we've referred to in the past. It's a summary of our recommendation for 2016-17 staffing. In particular, we itemize out all the additions as well as the reductions based on a variety of reasons as articulated in the rationale for adjustments to our staffing for this coming school year. The red is the reductions, and the non-red colors, so there's different colors based on levels, would be the additions. And we've had an opportunity to talk about this in detail, so unless there's specific questions, you can see the total at the bottom is 182,000, I just lost it on here. 182,839 is our estimated amount of the cost for these recommendations.
On many of these, we have the word enrollment and then a colon, and that's basically meaning that the registration for that particular program is not going to be there. The student.
Right. For example, an increased enrollment in Spanish has necessitated our recommendation to increase that position by, I believe it's the 0.6, yes, there. Similarly, as enrollment fluctuates at the middle school, we have corresponding reductions based on that. And the elementary level, we're reducing by 2 sections, which also is reflected in the reductions there. So yeah, the enrollment-driven ones can go up and down, and we tried to articulate there what the basis for it is.
Mr. President?
Yes, Rob.
How many of these positions, these ads, have anything to do with the referendum?
There's the one position, the associate principal at the high school, as related somewhat to the referendum. It was contingent upon the referendum passing, and it's really to support the high school at a higher level. Our principal, Pike Shoemaker, is going to have a lot of time necessitated towards the development of, or it needs to be developed, or time needs to be focused on the referendum and the various things that will come as a result of that referendum passing. And to support the high school, we felt it was necessary. It will be reviewed after the completion of the referendum and have it be enrollment dependent as to whether or not it continues.
I think that's an absolute necessity. We're going to have a lot of work going on in the phasing and all of the chaos that construction and planning creates. So I think it's
So that position, based on the timeline that Nick previously discussed, would be when we make these staffing decisions in April of 2019, we're going to be looking forward at whether that's going to be needed for the 2019-2020 school year.
Yes.
Mr. President?
Yes,
I have
Sandy.
a question about that position. Does the school district hire, for a project like this, we hire a project manager, correct? Is that the
Yes.
discussion we were having the other day about the project manager needs to be somebody different than the company, the
Construction
engineering company?
So we'll have a construction management firm that we hire that helps us manage the project as far as overseeing all the different contractors, putting packages out to bid, you know, dealing with inspections, just the actual day-to-day of the construction part of the project. But because this is such a large project and it is going to have a tremendous impact trying to navigate the logistics of having anywhere from 1,700 to 2,000 students go to school in the middle of a construction zone, we will be constantly meeting and making changes to how that building is functioning. Because as one part of the building may be getting finished, we may be moving teachers into that part of the building and then changing where those students go to class and facilitating that. The design process, there'll be quite a few meetings associated with the design process of the building, not just with not just with teachers, but with building administrative staff. And then when you looked at, one of the things you asked for was the ratio of evaluatees to evaluators, and the high school had the highest level. And so if we were looking at, pulling the high school principal away on top of the additional evaluatees that they have, or teachers to evaluate, we felt that this was a necessity. Now, I think as I look at this and saw the last one last year, is the district does have a strong history of, as we've had decreases in enrollment or decreases in need, we have reduced positions. And so we would have every intent that if we do not see an increase in enrollment at the high school, that this position would be reduced down.
Yeah, because I don't see this position as a position being created because of enrollment. I see this position with what you're saying, it's a position being created because of this building project. So it would
Yes.
seem to me like when the building project is done, enrollment, unless enrollment has completely skyrocketed, there would be no reason to keep this position beyond the building phase.
Yeah, and that is a great assumption, because the only thing is, as we look at even Dr. Gillespie's numbers, is we could potentially be looking at an additional 300 students in that building over the next 5 years. And so I think what we'll have to do is continue to monitor it, and if it doesn't warrant keeping the position, we would eliminate the position,
Okay,
just
no.
as we've done with the other positions. So that would be the only thing. Usually when we add positions, it's usually enrollment contingent.
And when would this person be hired? Because
This fall,
first,
for this fall.
This coming fall.
Yeah, so while we're going through all the planning stages and meetings and different things like that, so as Peg is pulled away from her responsibilities, her normal day-to-day responsibilities, to be a part of that process, they'd be able to support it, and then for the next 2 years after that. So it'd be a total of about 3 years.
My last question.
You bet. No, you're fine.
Seems like the facilities guy, Jim,
Mhm.
would need help, maybe even more so than the principal of the high school. So is there any plan to get any help for Jim? Because he's going to be the one that's really going to be working with these people, isn't he?
Well, it's not just Jim. I mean, I would anticipate a large portion of my job will be to also oversee this project, because it is such a tremendously large project. A large portion of Tim's job will be to also be a part of those meetings as far as the working in and out, because as much as we'd like to say that as soon as they draw it on a piece of paper, it'll build out just like that, we know that there'll be lots of discussions and changes and things. So although Jim will be a part of those conversations and be involved with it, there's other people that will have tremendous increases in what their responsibilities are as associated with the referendum. We're not looking at adding positions as of right now to support Tim's office or my office or anything that we do. It's just going to be a matter of trying to realign some resources or different responsibilities, as far as things that I currently do that I may be able to continue to do, or may have to have some additional help. And the same thing with Tim. Some of the things that he currently is doing may end up getting shifted to Mark, the business manager, things along those lines. But the day-to-day of dealing with this level of construction and this project with all of those kids on site is going to be pretty intense for the high school for about 3 years.
All right, one last question. The money to hire this party, $139,000, is that the?
That's the all-in. So that's the insurance benefits, the WRS, the FICA, that's all the fringe, that's everything. So it's not the salary of the person, that's all of the residual cost. It's kind of like the $83,000 that you're looking at on what the reductions or what the additions for like a teaching staff. It's not that we're paying teachers $83,000. It's by the time you add in their health care benefits, dental benefits, retirement benefits.
That's what it costs us.
That's what it cost. That's a true cost of the district, because we felt it was important for you to see a true cost to these positions, not a salaried cost to these positions.
And is that, because this is a job that is becoming necessary because of the referendum, does that wage then get chalked up to the referendum, charged to the referendum?
We're trying to build, we're trying to build this right into the general budget.
Into the general budget?
Yeah, we're trying to build it right into the general budget.
Okay, just had to ask.
Nope.
All right, thank you.
And just so we're clear, it's not that this person that would be hired would be the one going to the construction meetings, because that's likely to be Peg quite a bit. It's just that we have to hire somebody unless we can clone Peg and she agrees to split her salary between her clone self, you know.
So,
It's- yeah,
that is correct. So this is really to take the load and some of the things that are happening at the high school, because Peg will be pulled away for those other activities.
And remind everyone that we're still in the first year of implementing the merit
Teacher
pay
salary
system for
structure.
the teachers and this teacher effectiveness and all that. So there's a lot going on at the administrative level. And after we get our first 3 years in under our belt with that, then hopefully we'll be used to that system and we can reevaluate. It happens to coincide with that 2019 spring review of this.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Say overall, I support we've had a chance to review this in the past. I will make one comment that we don't have a few folks here tonight, so I'm not expecting a big response on it. But, we are decreasing in enrollment and also in FTE status for business. And that's just a little concerning to me. We're talking about having students be more work ready coming out of our systems. And whether you're in the STEM program or if you're in the Healthcare Academy, you look at functioning today in a business. Those are businesses and they run and function, and people need to have skills around that. So maybe it's the way we're presenting those classes, the opportunities, what skills kids will learn in those settings. Because I think it is invaluable, regardless of what your future brings. Just having some of those basic skills, even the soft skills, that we talk about and have looked at over the years. So, again, just want to call that out and make sure that we're focused on that as we move forward in the future.
No, that's a great point. And what I will tell you is that Peg and her team are going to be reviewing the business curriculum and course offerings over the next year to make some determinations of how we can change that programming and get more kids involved, and how that also crosses over if we're looking at an entrepreneurial academy as potentially a next academy, but also in a healthcare academy and a STEM academy, there's obviously business related courses that they could be taking. And so there will be a pretty extensive look at what we're offering business-wise, what we should be offering business-wise, and we would anticipate that in the coming years that department would continue to grow. But as of right now, based on the enrollment numbers, we just can't justify having that much staff there.
Understand.
Any other questions? I guess the other one that was a larger one was the technology integration coach. That's 1.5 positions at $145,000. But again, that was just made necessary with the one-to-one initiative. And if we're going to be tripling the number of devices in the district and trying to integrate all that and get all the teachers
Will that be two
trained.
people then? 1.5?
1.5, so there's already a half-time person in there, so it'll be essentially equivalent to 2 full-time people.
Okay.
So, because we've already started the one-to-one rollout with some of the grades, and so, so that's exactly right. And that number is based on the $83,000 times 1.5.
All right.
Move to approve the 2016-17 staffing plan.
Second.
Motion by Bruce, second by Sue. All in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion passes. And the staffing plan is approved. This next one should be relatively good and short. but,
Should be painless.
Painless.
Yeah, do we need to talk? Well, very quickly. So both finance and personnel looked at this, but again, this is recommending the rates, the internal equivalency rates, since we're self-funded for health and dental insurance. And we're going to provide a summary there. And what we're recommending is for this year that we're proposing a rate increase of 0 for both the health and the dental. One of the large reasons for that is when we moved to self-funded, we became very claims-based in our costs, and we reduced some of the different administrative and other charges that a fully insured plan would charge us. So if you look all the way to the right, you can see our loss ratio, which is really the ratio of our total actual cost to what the planned funding is. It's running at about, for the total, an average for the year is running about 83, just about 83%. Right underneath that at the bottom in 14-15, that loss ratio is about 86%. And those are good numbers. If we're running somewhere around 15% under our costs, then we're in good shape. And so what this does is it sets us up for a zero rate increase. That being said, we still do look at targeting. So if we look at paid claims, that's at so far 4.7 million through March. We still want to look at having reaching about a 40% reserve for that, and that helps us in future years if we have years where claims are higher. The past 2 years that hasn't been the case, but at some point in time we'll have a year like that, and we'll need to dip into that reserve. That helps stabilize things and reduces this up and down kind of roller coaster ride with our budget and the effect on the levy and that type of thing. So, but at this point this year, 0%, and then that second page is dental. Dental is a lot easier. There's a limited benefit there. So again, the numbers are 83%, and last year our loss ratio was 91%. So. So far through February on the dental, we're tracking very well. So again, I'm proposing that if you approve that 0% increase for health and dental tonight, that would be great.
Tim, one question, go back up to on the medical. And on the plan funding, why isn't that just like 12 equal increments? I mean, I guess I started answering my own question. I saw the enrollment fluctuates. Yeah. But then on some of those months, the enrollment is down, but the number going into the planned funding like is 811 when it's down at 575, and then another month where it's only one more enrollee and it's 40,000 less. Mm-hmm. So why does planned funding fluctuate?
Yeah, we've got different things that happen. You know, staffing doesn't remain at constant levels. People coming in and off the plan don't remain the same throughout the year. So there's a lot of different things that go into that plan funding. So essentially what that is it's the district contribution and the employee contributions, and we really put that in a separate fund so we can track how we're doing. But you can see, yeah, as you mentioned, Jamie, the number of employees and family members enrolled does fluctuate throughout the year. And so if you see it go down, we have a tick up in the enrollment and a drop down in the plan funding. There is a lag in that, in how that withholding is taken out of paychecks. So person enrolls, we're catching it. We may be catching up on contributions from them over a couple of paychecks. So that would be probably the largest reason why that is.
But the 0% recommendation is being made because our loss ratio is less than it was last year, and we're starting to build up.
Yeah, we're in a good position to do a zero this year. One thing I do need to also mention is that in looking so far at our history, as we talked about at finance and personnel, is we have a $100,000 deductible per person right now, and as part of this approval, we'd also recommend that you move that to $110,000. That would be more of a baby step for us. We don't want to take unnecessary risk exposure in this, but moving from 100 to 110 is a small step up. So,
Mr. President, yes. What is that? The 100 to 110,000? What does that mean to the district financially?
That all depends on where our high claims come in, Rob. So if you currently, we've got a handful of people that hit over 100,000. We've looked at that historically. We only have a couple of years here, but we've looked at that historically. And by making that move, we think if that holds, if we look at history, and if that holds, we could save an additional $40,000 roughly.
Any other questions of Tim?
Move to approve the 2016-17 health and dental rates.
Second.
Motion by Bruce, second by Sandy. Any other questions, comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, motion passes. I'll now, on our agenda is ITS lease agreement renewal. That was on there conditionally in case we could get that renewal language finalized. That didn't happen, so we are pulling that from the agenda, and I'll now entertain a motion pursuant to the statutory or printed language there to adjourn to closed session.
I move to adjourn to closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statute 19.85, parent 1, parent C, for purposes of consideration of preliminary notices of non-renewal of certified staff and for purposes of consideration of layoff of support staff.
Second.
Motion by Sandy, second by Bruce. Recalls for a roll call vote. Start with Rob.
Brown eye.
Whitaker, aye.
Gerke, aye.
Hanson, aye.
Johnson, aye.
Robson, aye.
Katas, aye.
We are now adjourned to closed session, and we will adjourn from closed session for the night. Thank you.